So this is the continuation of the campaign for Geronimo. So this is part A of the Khoodeelaar television channel being broadcast only on the internet at 10:15 hours GMT and 11:15 hours UK local time. And this is the tabloid, Fleet Street tabloid, owned by Rupert Murdoch. And this is one of the two tabloids, Fleet Street tabloids, that have actually given space to Geronimo's plight. That's the picture of Geronimo. Now this is something that is happening at the same time when the Fleet Street papers, generally so-called British mainstream media, are running two other main kind of news stories. One is of course the various ways they are described, the desperation for thousands of people, if not more, to what is being called the escape the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan. And the other story is the mass murder in Plymouth in England. Plymouth is not far from where Geronimo lives, in Gloucester, not far in the general context. So Plymouth, the mass murderer, Jake Davison. The mass murderer is a white mass murderer who was originally described in the British media as the Plymouth shooter, and it was hastily added that the police and the authorities were not treating Jake Davison as a terrorist. Now they've revised their kind of terminology, and they're saying that Jake Davison is being treated as a terrorist, and his mass murder is being treated as a terrorist mass murder. Now, for the time being, we'll not discuss the racist bias in favor of a mass murderer, terrorist mass murderer, such as Jake Davison, because we are looking at the universal values, the values of compassion, of justice, kindness, and moral and ethical courage to defend the life of an innocent, healthy Geronimo. The various photographs being carried by the British media about the desperate scramble, desperate rush by unidentified, but generally assumed to be potential victims of the Taliban regime, people trying to get on board American military aircraft, which themselves are being described as fleeing Kabul airport. Now, nobody in the Fleet Street media over the last 20 years, since the then American president, George W. Bush, and the then UK Prime Minister, Tony Blair, were given blanket coverage and support by Fleet Street papers, which did not mention the Fleet Street papers or the BBC or the other mainstream media in the UK or in the USA. They didn't even consider the possibility of what has been happening in the last few days in Afghanistan. And they didn't. The Fleet Street papers and the broadcasting counterparts, the BBC, ITV, Sky News in the UK, they didn't question. They didn't question that there would be scenes like what they're carrying on their front pages and on their inside pages in the last few days. To such an extent that the same Sun which has got the piece about Geronimo, the same Sun, of course, politically it is aligned to Donald Trump, so therefore anything that undermines Joe Biden is going to be splashed on the front page by the Rupert Murdoch owned and controlled Sun, which is what is happening. Now, Joe Biden is the joke Biden they're saying, but they're not saying the joke Boris Johnson, because Boris Johnson himself is a supporter of Donald Trump, and Boris Johnson himself is a critic of Joe Biden. But Boris Johnson, in the last 20 years, whatever guise he has been in, as he has been promoting his greed is good career, Boris Johnson has not been mentioned in any substantial commentary or any substantial platform where Boris Johnson has said anything about the repercussions, the implications, the impact of the UK and the USA occupying Afghanistan. Now, this is the UK, well, the showing UK pledging to aid refugees. Remember that as well. The phrase, the UK pledging to aid refugees, is very strange, because the very Sun newspaper, which is carrying this sentence on its front page, has been one of the two main tabloids attacking refugees for years. For the last 20 years, let's say, they've been attacking refugees. So this phrase, to aid refugees, is very, quote, un-UK, un-British, given the context, given the record of the last 20 years. So what we are saying is that the newspaper's role, as well as the role of the governments, have been untruthful, corrupt, and whatever pledge they make to aid refugees, they're not going to actually save the lives of so many thousands that are going to die and have been killed and have died in the last 20 years. If it's an appropriate word to call Biden a joke Biden because of his decision, which he has backed in the last 48 hours, to pull out the American troops from Afghanistan, then all the decisions like that made by a government, made by a state, affecting the lives and livelihood and the welfare and the safety of people in the country or countries affected by the decision, are entitled to demand that accountability and transparency and morality must be seen to be being adhered to at the time the decisions are being made. The evidence that has been published in the Daily Mail in the last few days, evidence that refers to other innocent animals being murdered. The evidence shows that innocent animals have been murdered on the say-so of the British government. Now that evidence is the tip of the iceberg, is a tip of the iceberg. That evidence is a tip of the iceberg. That is the evidence that has been mentioned as being significant evidence of behavior, wrong behavior, cruel behavior, unscientific behavior, unjustified, unhealthy, cruel behavior on the part of the person or persons who persisted in ordering the murders of these owners of alpaca and llama, who have described the agony of seeing their livestock slaughtered despite false positive tuberculosis results. So here is a picture. 5 of John Carr Ellison's llamas were put down. This is the man in the main picture, John Carr Ellison. And his healthy, perfectly healthy llamas were murdered. And the concept of murder is included in the statement published by the Sun newspaper and attributed to Stanley P. Johnson, who is the biological father of Boris Johnson, the incumbent at number 10 Downing Street. Now, Stanley Johnson is not somebody that we have kind of acknowledged or supported in the past. But Stanley Johnson is somebody we are supporting and acknowledging the role of, in view of the fact that he has come out and he has condemned the random murderers errand against Geronimo. Because all three of those words in that phrase are factually true. It's random because it's completely nothing to do with Geronimo's actual state of health. And everyone who knows about alpacas and similar camelids and animals, that the group of animals or the species that Geronimo belongs to, everyone who knows about them is, of course, a person who either cares for them or looks after them, or as an expert in health has been treating them or has experience of treating them on whether they have illnesses, diseases or not. And nobody in all of UK has come out with the opposite kind of statement to this one. Now, this is a statement printed on page 27 of the Daily Mail of Friday, last Friday, the 13th of August. Remember what I'm saying. No one who knows about the camelids, the species that Geronimo belongs to, has come out in the last, let's say, 2 weeks, 2 substantial weeks, with any, even the slightest suggestion that supports the lying position presented in the name of DEFRA, but actually presented by the regime of Boris Johnson, because Boris Johnson's regime is exposed as criminally, that is wrongfully, intentionally wrongfully, murdering a perfectly innocent, perfectly healthy Geronimo in order to terrorize unnamed but factually actively existing owners of alpacas and other animals. Terrorize them into submission. Terrorize them into not proceeding with the claims. There are multi-million pound claims for compensation and damages that people are lining up to make against the Boris Johnson government or the UK government that has DEFRA as a department, executive department. Executive is the key word there. Because they want to frighten the owners, the farmers, the owners of the animals into dropping their outstanding claims against DEFRA. Those claims have been outstanding for years and they amount to millions of pounds. So what Boris Johnson is doing is murdering a perfectly healthy and innocent Geronimo in order to terrorize those farmers. And in order to terrorize those farmers into dropping their claims based on this kind of behavior, that is in front of the camera on page 27 of the Daily Mail, Friday 13th August 2021. And they're saying our animal's fate at DEFRA, at Boris Johnson's kind of regime, whether he was the prime minister or not. Because Theresa May fronted the regime that Boris Johnson is fronting now, and they have been identical in their contempt for the evidence and the science and the innocence of the animals. This is what the Daily Mail of Friday, the 13th of August, ran on page 27. Our animal's fate proves why Geronimo must live, must be allowed to live. Alpaca and llama owners describe agony of seeing their livestock slaughtered despite false positive tuberculosis results. What this shows is that not only was the series of false positive tests wrong, unscientific, unsustainable, but that DEFRA as a department, supposedly in charge of safeguarding and looking after the welfare and well-being of animals, has been totally murderously unfit for purpose. Now, most of the people who are kind of have been on the record as supporting Geronimo and supporting Helen, his human mom, second mom, because Geronimo is a much loved creature who has left behind in New Zealand his original breeding mom, Leonie Walker, who told the Times in the last week that she was very sad to see Geronimo leave for the UK in 2017. So Geronimo is not an animal that has no history. Geronimo has got a history, and Geronimo is alive for as long as he has been alive, because Geronimo is not ill, that Geronimo is not diseased, because Leonie Walker said that Geronimo underwent 2 kind of tests before he left for UK, and both tests were negative. And that is on the evidence, that is on the records. And Geronimo cannot be ill and be alive for nearly, around 8 years. If he had been infected, if he had been carrying the disease. That's the Tuesday, last Tuesday, a week ago. Today is Tuesday the 17th, and this was Tuesday, the 10th of August, page 7 of the London paper, the Metro. This is the picture, closer to the camera. This is the picture of Stanley Johnson, the biological father of Boris Johnson. And he called it murderous errand, which is what they are calling it as well in the Metro newspaper. Let's see a bit if there is anything in the print edition of The Guardian today, the 17th of August 2021, because online they have published something. Yes, and there is a smaller piece on page 16 of The Guardian today. And it came out as I opened the page. I didn't even kind of look. As I mentioned The Guardian, Geronimo came up. And this item on page 16 of The Guardian of and they're repeating the item that they have done in the online version. It seems that the person whose name is put in the Guardian piece as the byline holder is spelled Kamil Ahmed, Kamil Ahmed. It is an incompetent, ignorant, callous, and stupid and false article. If it has been written by Kamil Ahmed in a different way, and if the version that appears on page 16 is a heavily edited version, then of course Kamil Ahmed is not to blame, and the Guardian editorial regime is to blame. Let's put it this way. This item, remember that most people in Afghanistan, most people in nearby Pakistan, Uzbekistan, and in the rest of the world that is acquainted with, familiar with the British media, is falsely kind of brainwashed into thinking that the Guardian, this Guardian, this title, this Guardian, is a responsible newspaper. What is the responsible newspaper? What is the definition of responsible newspaper? If the Guardian, as this piece, as it is printed, whatever the process the item was put through before this version in this way was printed in today's paper, 17th of August, 2021. If this is the kind of journalism that the Guardian kind of carries, then the Guardian is not a responsible newspaper. That the Guardian is indifferent, callous, and ignorant about the fact that a perfectly healthy Geronimo has been defamed by the murderous agency of Boris Johnson's government called DEFRA. Because the purpose in defaming and lying about the true state of health of Geronimo is to commit a bigger crime. The crime to justify the already committed murders of alpacas and llamas and other animals, but also to justify blocking and refusing to pay compensation to the people who have been heartbroken, victims of the murders of their animals, perfectly healthy animals. What does this show? This shows that there is no rule of law, there is no due process, there is no fairness, there is no compassion. Just as you would associate with the marauding, army of the Taliban. Marauding army, terrorizers, that the Guardian is spreading. Because the Guardian is saying chaos in Kabul as thousands struggle to flee the Taliban. What are the meaning by the Taliban? What are the meaning by flee the Taliban? Of course, they're meaning that the Taliban represents injustice, represents cruelty, represents terrorism and tyranny, and a regime of frightening innocent people, murdering innocent people, raping women, murdering children. No rule of law, no due process, no chance of expecting justice. Is that true about Britain? Of course it's not. Britain is the opposite of what the Taliban controlled, Taliban occupied, Islamists occupied Afghanistan is like. Unlike Afghanistan, unlike the Taliban controlled Afghanistan, Britain offers justice to the innocent. Britain has due process. Britain upholds the principles of justice as articulated and ascribed to the 1255 version of the Magna Carta by David the president of the then president of the Supreme Court on the 17th of January 2017. Britain has the due process of law, and as the same David, the same president of the Supreme Court, told the London Evening No Standard, or as reported by the London Evening No Standard, on the 4th of July 2017, I'm going by memory. What he said, I'm going to fact check on that one. So this is the David Neuberger, Neuberger. Now, David Neuberger was reported in July 2017 as claiming and the headline in the Evening No Standard said it. He said Brexit could boost London's status as world's legal centre, Britain's top judge says. And the Evening Standard Online had this picture of Neuberger. Now this was posted by Martin Bentham, dated the 4th of July 2017. I have mentioned this many times in the past. Whenever I have examined or investigated or diagnosed the behavior of the various courts in this country. Remember, I have been an active constitutional law and legal rights advocate for a number of decades, since before David Neuberger became a licensed law trader. I didn't have a license to trade as a lawyer, licensed law trader, because the racists of the Lincoln's Inn lied about the duly submitted evidence that I should start as a barrister between 1973 and 74. And a woman called Barbara Bates was the administrator at the Lincoln's Inn. And it was Barbara Bates, the racist liar, that lied and concealed the evidence of my fulfilling the requirements. Because those days, the procedure was different. So I would have been practicing as a licensed law trader since at least 1973. It would be 5 decades that I would have been practicing as a barrister. But even before that, I had been practicing various aspects of the law and legal advocacy. Now, so therefore, my familiarity with the practice and the formalities and the institutional shape, size, nature, implication, impact of British law, English law, is probably uniquely more extensive and more deep or deeper than anyone else around. So I should know what is happening with the behavior of the court or courts that reportedly had rubber stamped. Well, this is a phrase that I would use because they would not have taken the side of DEFRA and they would not have endorsed any kind of harm to be done to the perfectly healthy and innocent Geronimo, had they done due process, had they done the kind of legal scrutiny that Neuberger is boasting about. So he says here, as printed or as written on the Evening Standard, no Standard, Evening, London Evening, quote, no standards, standard. No standards is my factual description. The country's most senior judge has declared that Brexit could boost London's status as the world's legal center by allowing the courts to respond more swiftly to emerging worldwide issues. Now that's a very big claim indeed. Now that presupposes and assumes that London's court system and the courts were seen by people outside of this country as providing fair forums for legal claims and legal litigations, claims and counterclaims. The next paragraph, Martin Bentham says, Lord Neuberger, the president of the Supreme Court, said that once British judges were left to our own common law devices, that is within the quotation that is clearly attributed to David Neuberger, and we shall read that again, containing that sentence. Lord Neuberger, the president of the Supreme Court, said that once British judges were left to our own common law devices, they would be able to react more quickly and freely to developments in our fast changing world. He also insisted that Britain's departure from the European Union would in no way undermine London's status as the world center for legal services generally and dispute resolution in particular, and was instead acting as a spur to further improvements. That is a reference. The acting is a reference to Brexit. Now, the experience of Helen Jane MacDonald, the woman and human mom, fighting for the last 4 years to protect Geronimo from the murderous errand of the UK Conservative government shows that there is no truth whatsoever in the peddling plug fronted by David Neuberger on behalf of the courts bureaucracy in Britain. But then there is an admission contradicting that whole promotion in the next paragraph. Singling out Labour's 1999 Access to Justice Act, notice what the ownership is. It's the Labour Party's 1996 Access to Justice Act as the root of the problem in the courts. Neuberger said, we have a serious problem with access to justice for ordinary citizens and small and medium-sized businesses. And the very significant contextual next and the last sentence, if that is access to justice does not exist, said Neuberger, society will eventually start to fragment. Here you've got it. If access to justice, as presumably Neuberger was defining it as being, including due process, rule of law, fairness, if that kind of access for ordinary people didn't exist, then society would start to fragment. You could not summarize the impact of all of that Geronimo's being targeted for murderous errand contains. The very future of society can be devastated if due process of law, due and fair behavior by the court system is not seen to be delivered for the ordinary citizens. Helen Jane MacDonald is one such ordinary citizen. And her being denied true justice by the court so far is exactly the kind of thing that Neuberger's statement was envisioning. Should Helen MacDonald be continued to be denied true access to justice today? All evidence, all diagnoses, all facts point to the fact that Helen must be granted the application to protect the perfectly healthy Geronimo. And Geronimo must be left alone. And DEFRA must be scrapped. And Boris Johnson must be given the marching orders. What is the legacy that so far the behavior of Dofra and Boris Johnson, what legacy has already been created by the behavior of Dofra? Let's look at the evidence. And the evidence is that the behavior of the UK government has been dishonest. That successive statements by Defra against Geronimo and against Helen MacDonald over the last 4 years. So we've just changed the publication time of this particular broadcast. There was an inaccuracy by 1 hour. That was a technical oversight. And the starting time should have read 10:55 GMT and 11:55 UK, within quotation mark, UK time. So we've corrected that one now. And what we shall be doing is continuing with the broadcast as it is ongoing and correct further any kind of temporal time related inaccuracies caused unintentionally, of course, due to oversight, lack of proper sight at the various technical details that are being included for broadcast. If the clock is malfunctioning, then we shall correct that one as well, because the difference in terms of clock between the GMT and the UK local time is, of course, a source and a cause for frequent misunderstandings. Now, the year before, calendar year before the statement that Neuberger made peddling the London court system. On Sunday, the 4th of December 2016, The Guardian Online ran the promotion for the Observer. It's Observer profile. It says that David Neuberger, the judge with the nation's eager eyes upon him. Now, this is a propaganda. This is not evidence-based. This is not fact-based, because the hype of the personality is completely, absolutely impossible to relate to, quote, the nation. Ordinary people in Britain have no access to the evidence, to the facts of the behavior of the courts. And by the courts is meant the higher courts, like not the magistrates' courts or the county courts. They are the lowest tiers of the court system. When the courts are referred to, including by Neuberger himself in July 2017, when he was primed, he was groomed to make that kind of propaganda assertion by David Lidington. Lidington is Lidington. David Lidington, not David Neuberger. David Lidington was in post in July 2017 as the Chancellor, Lord Chancellor, or the cabinet member for, or in the name of justice, in the name of the court system and the court's bureaucracy. And Lidington, who otherwise had been reported to have voted in June 2016 for the UK to remain in the European Union, found himself in that post after the liar David Cameron resigned. Cameron is the one who brought about Brexit, the disaster. And Cameron resigned in a stunt, in an intentional stunt. Cameron resigned. And Cameron's resignation was followed by the Conservatives, who had majority in the House of Commons still, electing Theresa May to succeed Cameron as the leader of the Conservatives, and by definition, by that default, be the Prime Minister of the country, which she became. And Theresa May appointed David Lidington to become the minister, cabinet minister in her cabinet, to deal with the court system, the legal system administration, so-called. So both Theresa May and David Lidington had reportedly been opponents of Brexit. But as soon as they became the government, they became ferociously dedicated pushers for Brexit. And as a desperate attempt by David Lidington to add traction to his position as the minister in charge for legal affairs, Lidington, a crafty, self-seeking opportunist by all evidence, set about trying to get as much support for Brexit as possible in the field of the law, so-called. So he produced this exhibit in the person of the president of the Supreme Court, David Neuberger. And Neuberger set about complying with David Lidington's wishes by spreading all kinds of music about Brexit. How Brexit would become a spa, a source of improving the business potential of the UK courts, London-based courts bureaucracy for the whole world. Now that was based on the presumption. It's a completely lying and false presumption that London court system, like the High Court has got various divisions, where one of the divisions, that is the Queen's Bench division, Queen is related to the monarch of the day. If it's a man, then it will be King's Bench division. So we have for decades in post the monarch who is a female. So it's Queen's Bench division. And Queen's Bench division has got the highest number of subsidiary High Court or High Court kind of forums and platforms. And it sees or it deals with the largest number of litigation. But the Queen's Bench division is also the most corrupt part of the High Court. London-based, but because the administration of the Queen's Bench division is done by long-ranging racists, liars, crooks, and criminals who have no idea about the requirements on government, on the state, to apply due process, to follow due process, or obey the rule of law. So when the newspapers, please remember, you are watching, essentially you are watching world exclusive diagnosis of Fleet Street. That is the newspapers that are associated with the street called Fleet Street. In other words, the newspapers that are collectively known as the main British newspapers, because they are published from addresses in London. They're in English, of course. But the newspapers, Fleet Street newspapers, are in the main, when it comes to relating to the rest of the world or the rest of the continent, the Fleet Street newspapers are servile, absolutely servile, mentally enslaved to the agenda and the narrative and the purpose of the UK Conservative Party and government. So they don't tell the truth. What happens with events like the flight, the desperate flight from Afghanistan or from Kabul, in view of the fact that the Taliban have been arriving and taken control? On those occasions, the Fleet Street newspapers, like the Daily Mail, online and in print, like the Sun, online and in print, drop any relationship with the government, with the regime. And they concentrate, move over to the emotion, to the highest level of emotion that they can charge their coverage with, in order to draw the most attention of the most numbers of the gullibles in Little England. And this has been the case. For example, here, the daily bribing Boris Graf also known as the Telegraph, is completely disconnected from Boris Johnson, and it is presenting this front page splash of a headline as a neutral one, which, under the weight of the contents, puts the blame on Joe Biden. And in effect, it puts the regime of Boris Johnson in a better light than the regime of Joe Biden. So it's bribing Boris Johnson's regime as well. And there is this, the Matt, the cartoonist, who features on the front page of this lying newspaper. He is complying with Boris Johnson's need. It says the two kind of characters, two animals that are being painted in this Matt, drawn in this Matt cartoon. One is saying to the other, I knew I should have deleted the app. That's the ping about the vaccine. It seems I've been in close contact with a sickly alpaca. Now that's not a joke. That is Boris Johnson's cartoon. That's not true. And that should not be printed had it not been for the fact that the editor of the daily bribing Boris graph thinks that any help in promoting the slightest idea that Geronimo the alpaca is unwell and sick would help Boris Johnson's political purpose, the corrupt criminal purpose in supporting the murderous plot against Geronimo. Now, whatever is going on in the court today, it is supposed to be today, and it is supposed to be before 5 o'clock today, Tuesday, before 5 p.m. Tuesday the 17th of August 2021. So the sword of Damocles has been hanging over the head of Geronimo, the innocent victim targeted for murder. Targeted for murder to be shown to have been legitimate by the use of the pliant, corrupt court system, which has served the government DEFRA agenda so far. Now, we shall come to Geronimo as featured on the Daily Boris Graph, the page 9 of the Boris Graph. Now, this is the first time we have seen today, or in the last 24 hours, the correct use of the word blunders or blunder. So this is correct. This headline is correct to the point so far. The Geronimo wins stay of execution over TB test blunders. But he should go further and say that criminally staged false TB tests conducted to suit the agenda of the government as fronted by DEFRA. And it is also correct in this this caption. And I shall read the caption in full. Helen MacDonald with Geronimo write on her farm in Gloucestershire yesterday, that is Monday, the 16th of August. The court is to consider if an interim injunction should be made to suspend the death warrant. This is absolutely the correct statement. Of course, the court should. Now, is the court going to? That is during this day. Whether it has started the hearing or not, I cannot say at this stage because I cannot see any evidence online, but I cannot check the evidence either. Now let's see if there is any kind of interim update online by the online kind of outlets. Now this is a piece on the Bristol Live online, and it shows it was posted 18 minutes ago, and it reads, the heading reads, more Geronimo uncertainty amid claims DEFRA, within quotes, hopes he will die. Can you believe that? Instead of saying that DEFRA will wait for the due process to take place, instead of that, they're saying they're hoping that Geronimo will die. It's like the statement from a marauding Taliban kind of gang invading Afghanistan. So she's being correctly quoted in the Bristol Live piece here. If DEFRA tried to do something before the case is heard, that would be the most despicable thing ever. They know that the science is not there. and we just want some reasonable behavior. We want some grown-up conversations, and there are options on the table for them. This is just another step in clearing Geronimo's name. Absolutely. So this is the bigger picture of the target, Geronimo and his mom. On page 9 of the Daily Boris Grab, bribing Boris Grab, Daily Telegraph on Tuesday the 17th. Tuesday the 17th of August. That's Geronimo with his mom. That's Geronimo. And what this Bristol Live piece and the quotation there, quoting Helen MacDonald, show is that there is no rule of law, there is no due process. It's just like the Taliban. The Taliban are executing people, murdering people wherever they can. And the DEFRA is behaving like desperate, urgent, mad rush to murder Geronimo because they assume they've got the power. And the rule of law must intervene. The Magna Carta must intervene. Due process must intervene. Remnants of justice must intervene. So what other evidence is there in today's Fleet Street papers? What kind of take, if there is any take? See, the page is there. I don't have to search. It's page 19 that comes up. And here is the little Geronimo. On page 19 of the Daily Mail, there are 4 columns next to him are given to Bob Dylan, who groomed and raped a 12-year-old in 1965. So these celebrities are, more often than not, these celebrities in the UK and in the USA turning out to be rapists. Now, the Daily Mail piece that is quoting a DEFRA spokesman is not making clear that the DEFRA spokesman is not answering the question. This criminal, whoever he or she is saying the testing results and options for Geronimo have been very carefully considered by DEFRA, not mentioning the law, not mentioning the state of the health of this Geronimo, not mentioning the fact that literally thousands and thousands of alpacas are alive because they are not ill, and they would have been dead if they had been ill. So the actual result the actual, let's say, evidence of what Boris Johnson's government is saying is that they're lying. And secondly, the fact that they're lying so openly and publicly shows that they don't care about due process, they don't care about rule of law, they don't care about outrage caused by their murderous plot to murder Geronimo. According to the Telegraph, they say that they're going to murder him after 5 o'clock today. And what they're saying, well, not the Telegraph, it's the bit from Bristol Live. If they murder Geronimo after 5 o'clock today, then they are defying the courts. Think about that. They're defying the role of the courts, not the actual verdict, because the verdict has not been delivered. The judicial review application has not been considered yet. It has been accepted, but not been considered. Now, this would be existential, suicidal behavior by Boris Johnson's regime. So what we shall be doing is ending this particular edition here, and I shall continue in the rest of the day.